Hello and welcome back to the movies. Made us do it. Me and Matt are back. How are you, Matt?
I am pretty good, sir. How are you?
I tell you what, I am great, and I'm great for a number of reasons. It's almost Christmas. That's nice, but
Yep.
it's very rare that a movie that I loved as a kid falls off my radar. Like very rare. I'm as you know, I'm very nostalgic by nature.
Yeah.
And The Battery's Not Included, the movie we're reviewing today,
Yeah.
is a film that I watched to death as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of, it's one of those movies that for like, I don't know, probably the best part of a decade now, I've been like, I need to get that on DVD and rewatch it. And I just haven't. For one reason or another, I don't know why. It's about the only movie from my childhood that I just haven't watched since I was a kid, and I've not gone back to it, although I kept meaning to. And I was really glad when you said, hey, we should do Batteries Not Included.
It wasn't me.
I know.
This is down to my good wife.
It is, and it's her.
Absolutely loves this movie.
One of her favorite films of all time, right?
It is, yeah. She absolutely adores this movie, and I loved it as a kid. And I'd watched it on occasion with her, but that was a while ago. So it'd been a long time since I'd seen it. But,
yeah,
again.
Yeah. It's been, well, I haven't watched it since I was a kid, and I had such a good time rewatching this yesterday. Like I was like, oh my god, this is aged so well.
Yeah, I think it has. I think
it's great.
It's certainly a little capsule of the 80s, though.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, the effects, for the most part, and we'll get. I personally think, and we'll get into it very soon. But I personally think the worst effects in this movie are actually in the opening.
Yes.
But once we get past the dodgy Photoshop, the 80s Photoshop,
there's that, and the backdrop when they're on the roof is the worst.
Yes, that's terrible. That's a little The Room-ish, I must admit.
Yeah.
But when did you first see Batteries Not Included?
Well, it would have been as a kid. I'm not sure. I don't think I went to the cinema to see it, so I imagine it would probably have been on video.
Yeah, I think my parents bought this for me on VHS. Because I distinctly remember having the VHS in the VHS, not like an actual official VHS, as opposed to I taped it off TV.
Yes.
We had this movie and watched it to death. I remember watching this over and over again, as you do when you're a kid, right? It's a movie you like, you just watch it constantly.
When I was talking about it to my wife, I was saying that when I was a kid, I kind of watch anything that was even vaguely sci-fi.
Oh, same. If it had like aliens, robots, lasers,
yeah, exactly.
I'm like, I'm sold. I love it.
Exactly. So we can't go to the video shop, and if there was anything on the cover, which in some cases was like, yeah, this is on the cover, and
there's like nothing like it in the film. But, yeah.
you'd grab it, and it's got Steven Spielberg's name on it, so at that time you're like, well, if Steven Spielberg's got anything to do with it, then it's bound to be brilliant, isn't it?
It's got the wonderful painting of the quote unquote female robot coming through the window. That shot, that painting, I always remember that from the cover, and it's like, oh, that's incredible.
Yeah,
it's that it takes you back to that time of, like you said, the video store, and most of those paintings were not representative of the quality of the film or even what was in the film half the time.
Especially
but the paintings
were
incredible.
Were terrible for it.
Oh, horror and low budget sci-fi were terrible.
Yeah.
But the paintings and the art was always amazing. And this is one of those instances where it's actually perfectly representative of what you're watching in the film.
Yeah.
But yeah, same as you. I first saw this on VHS and I watched it to absolute death. And then for some reason I just stopped. And now I am so glad that you or your good wife suggested that we, delve back into this one. Because it was a joy to watch this yesterday, let me tell you. So much fun, and a lot of it I'd forgotten as well, which is,
I think the last time I watched it, I think I came in like halfway. I think my wife was watching it, and I came in sort of halfway through. And watching it this time round, and watching the beginning, I was struck by how almost depressing. The beginning.
Oh boy, it's a tough movie in places.
Such a dark opening. It's like, good lord.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we open with what I think is, it's aged badly, the photoshops they use here to put the characters in.
I mean, it's actually their heads.
Oh no, I know it is. Yeah, I can see
their real faces that they've just cut out, and because
they look awful. Like,
the heads aren't even the right size for the bodies.
Sometimes they're not looking the right direction as well. They're like slightly off. But I will say,
it sets up the scene well.
The concept of this opening is wonderful. I love the music. I love what they've done. It's just the fact the technology at the time wasn't quite there to quite pull off the effect. But seeing how New York used to be in their day. In Frank and Faye's day, and we get all these wonderful pictures of it as the credits roll with the different characters, young, and it is obviously the actual actors' faces, as you said. It's the actors' faces they've put into place.
Tandy and Cronin had been married since the 40s. They were a real life couple,
and we go from that to transition. As we see Faye, don't we? I think it opens with Faye.
Yeah. Walking along with her little trolley.
Yes.
And with odd shoes on.
Yeah. And she approaches. It's like an old shop, isn't it? I'm not sure what shop it's meant to be, but presumably somewhere she used to shop or.
Yeah, it looks like a sort of corner, sort of supermarket type thing, doesn't it, or something?
Yeah, and it's completely demolished. And we soon realise that the whole area is basically being demolished, and we see that there's a company, I guess it's Mr. Lacey, the Lacey company are basically trying to build Lacey Plaza, and the entire area is being demolished, but there is one building in the middle of this development that's still fighting the good fight, and they're trying to keep their home. And I think it's their home of like 50 years or something.
Yeah,
like, it's their whole lives are wrapped up in this. And then also you've got younger tenants that we'll get to very shortly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it opens with her going to the shop, and then we cut back and we see Frank, and they're kind of concerned because they can't find her, aren't they? They're like, where is she?
They're sort of they're about to open the cafe, their little cafe up, which is connected to the building, and they're there's there's another couple that clearly works for them and that live in the building as well, and they obviously look. I think the wife must look after her most of the time by the looks of it when Frank's busy.
Yes, Sid and Muriel, I think is the name of them.
Yeah.
So I think Muriel basically looks after Faye because she's got like mildish dementia, I guess.
Yeah,
at this point.
I think it's interesting because it's not. I don't think it's just dementia as well. I think there's also
it's grief as well.
She's suppressing memories.
Yeah,
which is not helping her dementia.
No. But yeah, and then we get this shot of like he's like worried about Faye, and he's talking to Sid and Muriel about where she is, and then he just sees a bulldozer coming right towards the building, and he's like, obviously is like, what the hell, runs out there, and he's just like, get off my property. And this bloke who I kind of come to love by the end of the movie.
He's brilliant. Yeah.
He's like this builder. He's like, I just wanted a sandwich. I'm not going to demolish your building.
Gus is it?
Gus, that's it. But it's very Hitchhikers, this opening, where it's like at the start I was like, he might well just run straight into this building when he gets the chance. But but yes, and then Faye comes back and they're all worried about her, and it's very clear at this point that Faye has some kind of dementia or she's very confused. She asks what's his name, the builder guy, Gus. She asks him to take his cap off, and she's like, is that Billy or someone? She's like, who is that? And they're all like, no, it's not him. Like, he's grown up and moved on, and he lives somewhere else. And it's quite clear that she's got some mental health issues at this point. So So they all obviously have run this diner. Presumably Frank and Faye have run the diner for 50 years. They also live in the building. And there's a couple of tenants. There's Mason, who's like starving artist type.
Well, yeah, I love Mason's hilarious because
I love him.
He's like the embodiment of yacht rock, isn't he?
He really is. Yeah.
He looks like one of those late 80s singers.
Yeah.
It's like he's clearly from money.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then you've got Harry. I love the introduction to Harry because Harry is there in the hallway, and he's repairing the floor with a jar of mosaic tiles.
Yes,
and it's literally you see him sort of like struggling to put these match these things up and put them in there, and it's just like the ultimate pushing a boulder up a hill thing, because you could just see he's trying to repair this floor while everything around him is falling apart and being destroyed.
You get the impression that the building is all he has. It's like his life now is just within this building, and he's, like you said, he's just trying to repair this tiny mosaic on the floor of a building that's the last standing building, and it's really dilapidated as well. The outside of the building's awful,
completely crumbling.
Everything on both sides has been demolished, including like adjoining buildings. Like you can see the pieces of other buildings that have been demolished. But yeah, it's clearly all he's got, and I really love Frank McRae's performance in this movie. I think it's one of his strongest performances, actually.
I never realised until watching it this time that all of his lines are adverts.
Yeah, that's all he pretty much says, isn't it?
All of his lines are ads from TV. I'd never realised that before.
They say in the movie that I think Frank says at one point that he doesn't speak. All he does is watch TV. He loves trailers. He loves the adverts. He loves the ads. And yeah, that's where we get the obviously immortal line of batteries not included.
Yeah.
Sorry, my cat just sneezed really loudly. Then I don't know if that came through. But we also see that there's a pregnant lady, Marissa.
Yeah.
And she's living alone in the apartment.
I mean, our introduction to her is also mixed with the introduction to Carlos and his goons.
Oh yes. So Mr. Lacey has sent some thugs, led by Carlos, to basically force money in people's hands, and they're like, right, you take this money and you fuck off, like that's it,
you're done. Yeah.
And I think the kind of idea is, if you take the money, then you're basically saying it's okay for us to demolish this building. Yeah,
you've agreed, and we're going ahead with it, basically.
And you get the impression Carlos has been around a lot. He's tried a lot. Now they're just literally posting it under people's doors and like, take it. If you don't push it back out through the door, we're assuming you're taking it, and that's it. Like, Carlos is fed up. He's tried. He's tried a lot. So yeah, I think we're also introduced to Kovacs as well, aren't we? Lacey's assistant, who's basically saying, take the money. Yes. It's the final offer you're going to get. So Carlos goes in and he basically, he tries to push the money into people's, through people's doors. He grabs, he basically breaks the door and grabs, what's her name? I can't think of her name. Mason's girlfriend at the time. It's Mason's
girlfriend, yeah. Played by Wendy Schaal.
Yeah. Who I love. She's got a great line in a bit, but
I love that line.
It made me laugh out loud when she said it.
I wrote down. I thought, I'm definitely making a note of that one.
Yeah, it was a great line. We'll get to it.
What I thought though is he smashes through that door, the panel at the bottom of the door, and pokes his head through, and she stood there. And I just thought,
step away.
If you look at her shoes, she's wearing the pointiest heels. She should have just kicked him in the face.
Yeah. Or taken 2 steps back. I mean,
she could have taken his eye out with those amazing boots she's got on.
Yeah. And they.
You also get the when he's hassling Marissa, she knocks her fridge and the statue of Mary that was on the top of topples over and breaks.
Yes. So we've got the door panel broken and the statue of Mary shattered. They go and basically burst into to Harry's apartment, although he hears them coming and basically hides behind a curtain.
Tries to hide, behind a curtain with his feet poking out the bottom.
Yeah, and he takes a big jar of money with him, which obviously...
No, it's not. It's a jar of the mosaics.
It's the mosaics, yes. Yeah. And of course they use they see his feet under the curtain, and they smash the jar. Basically, they would try and hit him, but obviously they hit the jar and it shatters.
And we established that he used to be a boxer.
Yes.
And now he sort of seems to be afraid of them.
Yeah.
He obviously had some sort of brain injury, and now he sort of just wants to live alone and be, left alone.
He's just very happy with what he's got here, and that's that.
Yeah.
That's all he wants. But yeah, and then Carlos, tries to give the money. Goes down to the diner and tries to give the money to Frank and Faye, and of course Faye takes the money and she's like, thank you so much, and of course she keeps thinking that Carlos is her son. She keeps calling him Bobby, and he keeps saying, like, I'm not Bobby, but then of course she takes the money, and that obviously enrages Frank, and Frank's like, get out of my shop. He then starts smashing things up, and of course Faye just thinks it's fun, so she picks up a plate and smashes it too, and he's like, yeah, come on, join in. It's just horrible. It's a really horrible scene. It's really
bleak opening. It really is.
It probably sounds funnier with me saying it than it actually is. It's really horrible. When you watch it, it's heartbreaking. It's like, oh, these poor people, like, and yeah, so he smashes up the diner. Starts to smash up the diner anyway. Yeah, and then basically we then get Kovacs, who says to them, like I said, he's take the money. It is the final offer. It's the final offer you're going to get. And Frank calls the police, which is weird. This was the bit where I was like, oh, this is so depressing. Was the police bit? Because he calls the police, and literally the thugs that just smashed up his diner are sat outside on the wall, literally opposite. Policeman pulls up, and he's like, arrest them. And he's like, look, if I arrest them, they'll get out of jail, and they'll come and get you. And he's like, well, not if you do your fucking jobs and protect the neighborhood. And the cop just looks around, and he's like, what neighborhood? And they just drive off. These people are completely abandoned.
He says if we call them in, all that's going to happen is they're going to have 20 friends that's just going to say that they were somewhere else,
and then they'll be out looking for revenge.
Yeah.
So finally, Sid and Muriel, who of course look after Faye an awful lot, Muriel in particular, I think, they've decided to take the money, and they've just had enough, and Frank confronts Sid about it, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you staying? And he's like, look, we're moving to basically a retirement community. He's like, we're moving somewhere. It's nice. And he gives them the leaflet. He's like, you should consider it. Because their apartment's been vandalized as well, and they're just done with it. And of course, Muriel gives Frank the instructions on what drugs to give Faye and what she needs to because obviously it's quite clear that Frank's been trying to keep the business afloat whilst Muriel's been helping with Faye's dementia and kind of almost acts as her nurse.
Yeah.
And I think Sid even says, like, come on, like, she can't live like this. Like, she can't stay here. It's just not going to be good for her.
Yeah.
But so he basically even he's considering at that point. He's like,
it's a really sort of sad scene where he sort of goes upstairs and he sort of puts her to bed, and you can see that how she's still in there, she's still there.
Oh yeah.
But and
he breaks down at one point. It's so sad. This movie
is in the kitchen and he's looking at the leaflet and
he smashes a big vase, doesn't he? A big glass vase. He smashes in just frustration. He smashes this vase. And
of course, there's the picture of his.
It's like the diner as it was, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, it's that was broken downstairs, sort of thing, and he's got the pieces sort of.
Yeah.
Upstairs with him, and he then falls asleep on
the armchair, isn't it?
The armchair, yeah.
And this is where we're introduced to the Fix-Its.
Yeah, I don't think I ever knew them as the Fix-Its when I was a kid.
I think is what she calls them, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess I'd never really thought about it.
Yeah, no, I hadn't either. And these things, it's weird. I've never been quite sure what's going on with these things.
They are. Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming that they are just sentient robots, but it's weird because it looks like they've got windows, and it looks like they're just really tiny people in there, but then later on they have babies, and it's really confusing.
Yeah, I didn't know whether they're like colony ships or something.
That's what I thought, because they've got little windows and stuff in them, and they look very detailed.
The bit where
with the magnifying glass.
Yeah, where Mason is looking inside them, and you can see all the little things flying around and stuff. And it's like, is that just part of their function, or is that little beings in themselves? I've never quite.
No, it's never quite clear as to whether the headlights are eyes or lights or what they are, because they're quite they convey emotion as well. Mm-hmm. It could go either way. I'm not really sure, and I don't know that it necessarily matters. But
no, I don't think so. I'm either way, they're definitely alive. They're not.
Oh no, definitely they're either the things in there are alive or the actual beings themselves are these things, but they're sentient for sure.
Yeah.
And they come in and they're very one of them comes in and is very kind of fascinated by Faye, and just kind of floats around the room, getting up to all kinds of mischief, floating around wearing a wedding dress at one point, or a dress. Sorry, not it's like a night dress, isn't it? It's like a underdress or whatever. It flies around for a little while, and then it opens the window using the same thing that R2's got on top of his head, one of those things, to prop the window open to let the other robot in, which appears damaged or just needs power, because obviously we'll discover shortly that.
I think it's a sort of the. As we discover later, it's a pregnancy thing, isn't it? I think they've obviously come from a long way, and she needs extra juice.
Yeah. So she will, for the sake of this, we'll assume that
I'm guessing she's a female.
It's
presumed it was a male and female.
I'm only saying that because we don't know whether there's people in there or not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm going to assume let's assume for the sake of argument that these things are what they are. They're just those things are the beings. For the sake of argument, could go either way. But for the sake of this review. She plugs herself in the kitchen, doesn't she, to charge up on energy, so then the next morning, or is it that night? But Frank wakes up and basically notices, because he's kind of seriously considering. I think he falls asleep with the leaflet in his hand. He's like.
I think
he's given in. And we should say as well, sorry, before they did turn up, in the kitchen, he broke down and he begged for help.
Yes.
He was begging for help.
Of course, I forgot that line.
It's kind of important. I just remember I was like, that's kind of important to the thing. So then, yes, that morning that Frank, realizes that he kind of walks in and, she wakes up first, doesn't she? And she picks up the picture. And it's all repaired, and because they've gone around and repaired things. They repaired the picture, they repair the vase, they repair the statue, they repair the door. They kind of repair little things, everything around the house. And we kind of get that next day. The neighbors all wake up, everyone wakes up, and they're just totally confused.
We've forgotten two things. One, we've forgotten the Wendy Shaw. She leaves Mason, his girlfriend, leaves him. She's like, she.
Oh yeah, this is the line I wanted to. Yeah.
And that's when she does that line, and she says to him, "Why do you want to live here?" And he says, "It's reality. It's real." And she says, "It's the 80s. Nobody wants reality, and nobody likes reality anymore." And I thought, how funny that is.
Yeah,
it's just hilarious.
And then she's like, "Call yourself an artist? You never even asked to paint me nude." Just storms out.
Brilliant. And she walks up, and then of course he loses his temper and he throws out
all of his paintings.
all the paintings out, and then when he goes to get them in the morning, they are not there. They are gone.
Mysteriously disappeared.
Yes.
But what is there is his door. The hole in the bottom of his door has been repaired. We see the statue's been repaired, and this is where they kind of meet, isn't it? Because they're just completely bewildered. This is like, I think, Marissa's first time that she meets Mason, and he's like, what's going on? And she's just as confused. Meanwhile, Frank has found the picture. He wakes up and he sees the picture in the vase. Everyone's very confused that things seem to have been repaired, and for some reason I think this kind of spurs Frank on to continue, doesn't it? I guess because he was praying for help. He's like, oh, this is probably a sign then that I should continue. I'm trying
the most spectacular thing is that the restaurant's fixed, the cafe's completely fixed.
So you're right. So the diner has also been repaired, which obviously no one can quite understand. Obviously, Frank, I guess, just takes it on faith at this point. But of course, Carlos is like, the fuck? Like, I smashed all of this up.
And there's a really great, I think it's this bit, there's a really good bit where the bad guy, the Kovacs, is in his car and the music's playing. And the phone dial.
It's matched, isn't it?
Completely matched up to the tune. It's
great.
Really brilliant.
It's a lovely. I'm glad.
Minor thing, but it's beautiful.
I'm glad you noticed that, because I noticed that as well. I thought that was a lovely touch, that it was the dial was in time with the music. Really good.
I think Frank notices that there's no toaster.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so items have gone missing because Mason's also missing his coffee maker, isn't he, or something?
Yeah.
Or coffee pot, I suppose. So Carlos is just really confused. He looks in the window and they're just kind of dancing around the kitchen like, yay, everything's great. And then of course, either later that evening or early in the morning, Frank notices that Faye's gone, and he heads up to the roof, where it's a very E.T. moment with the shed on the roof, and it kind of screams E.T., where you've got lights coming from the shed, and he's like, what on earth are you doing out here, Faye? And she's basically throwing like nuts and bolts
from a can,
and of course by this point they're making such a racket that the neighbors all come up, and like Frank's like, please, he's like, oh, we used to have birds, and he's trying to tell her, he's like, please don't do this now, like, come on, let's go downstairs, because obviously he thinks it's all,
it's just an episode.
It's an episode. But of course it's not, and she says, she takes his Frank's pocket watch, and she's like, they're just shy, and she puts the watch on the thing and smashes it, and obviously this watch had some like value to Frank at least. And he's horrified. He's like, oh my god, like but then we see the robot come up, or the being come up, and it repairs the watch, and everyone's just like, what the hell? Like, this is insane.
That's what I also love about this movie as well, is that it doesn't take long before everybody in the building knows they're there. There's no sort of, I think a lot of movies would have like tried to keep them, nobody from finding out, or only the old lady finds out.
Or like in E.T., where it's like, oh yeah, one person finds out, or a couple, and they have to keep it quiet from everyone else. And yeah, but there's a real sense of community within this building in the movie. It's like they're all just in it together, and they all kind of adopt these creatures, or these beings. But so they discover, or Mason mostly kind of points it out, that a lot of what they've got up here are things that they've taken from people's houses, from like the apartments.
Frying pans and toasters.
The toaster,
almost anything with metal in, basically, I think it seems to be.
Yeah.
And of course, Faye knows it straight away what's going on. She's intuitively knows that she's pregnant, basically.
Yeah, they're nesting. Yeah. So they kind of start talking to them, as if they're kind of children, really. They start sort of treating them like children, and Faye's kind of feeding them. So they're now aware of it. Of course, Mason tries to phone the army. He's like, he phones because he thinks they're missing army tech, doesn't he? He's like on the phone to them, and he's like, "Is this like, have you lost some
a project or something?"
Yeah. He's bloody lucky they didn't come. That would have been a short movie. But yeah, and of course the Fix-It start kind of just causing some, not chaos, but they're mischievous, I guess is a good word for them.
Yeah.
No, they're trying to help, I think, and they're doing what they can.
It does have a sort of weird sort of parallel with like old tales of, because it even mentions elves at one point, and it has that.
Yes.
Like the elves and the shoemaker-y sort of. It's like forest spirits have turned up and they're fixing things, and if you feed them, they'll you look after them, they'll look after you. It does have that sort of, only instead of being fairies, it's aliens.
Yeah. But the ever kind of I guess ever desperate Carlos, because he's trying to get in with Mr. Lacey, and we see clearly later on that Mr. Lacey doesn't give a shit about Carlos, but Carlos is trying to climb the ladder, and he's promised that this building will get emptied in time. So there is we established later there is a time limit on they've only got the I think it's
permits to
do the destruction for so long, haven't they? And then they'll have to.
It's like 3 days left or something like that. I think I can't remember the exact figure, but it's not a lot of time.
And of course, by this point, the builders and whatnot have started coming back to the cafe. They're starting to dine in. It's either now or a little later. But in any case, Carlos is basically furious. He heads to the building. He's completely confused as to what's going on, but he threatens Frank and Faye, and he gets hit on the head with a frying pan from out of nowhere. And he, of course, he thinks I love that shot because he's kind of having a go at Frank, I think, or is it Mason? Having a go at one of them, and the male Fix-It hits him over the head with a frying pan, and of course he as he's turning around, he's like, whoever did that is like dead. And as he's doing that, Harry's walking up the stairs behind him.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh god, Harry's gonna get it. And you're right, in a normal movie, Carlos would have been like, oh, it was Henry that did it. Or Harry. Sorry, it's Harry, isn't it? Harry. It's Harry that did it, and he would have gone after Harry. But of course, no. He sees the Fix-It. The Fix-It's like clearly there,
well, he doesn't exactly see the Fix-It, does he?
But he sees the pan, though, doesn't he? He sees it flying around, and he thinks it's like a haunting, doesn't he? He's like, oh god,
he thinks it's spirits.
And
they follow it up to the roof, don't they?
Yes, this is where he gets electrocuted then, doesn't he? Because he goes towards the rooftop and isn't like Faye, like, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Like, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
And he tries to investigate the coop. And because I think there's that shot earlier, just slightly before this, where he's looking out across the city and he can see it lighting up on the roof. So he's aware that something's going on up there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he gets electrocuted, and of course,
I think we've missed it. I think Mason does get electrocuted as well, doesn't he? At one point.
So yes, Mason gets electrocuted first. You're right, and I think it might actually be Mason that's like, I wouldn't do that if I were you, because he's like, I've done this, mate. This is a bad idea.
Yeah. Really, don't do that.
yeah. But of course, Carlos gets electrocuted, and we get that kind of, I don't know, Looney Tunes.
It is
massive
very
hair. It's great.
Hair thing.
Home Alone-y kind of injury. And then of course we get some scenes with the Fix-Its kind of trying to help out around the place, and they're like,
Well, we have they haven't been, the little ones haven't been born yet. So
no. But Mason examines the male one. He kind of looks into it, and that's when you, like you said, you get that. It almost looks like a spaceship of some kind to me, but it's impossible to say. The movie never really elaborates, which I kind of like. Like that it's like a mystery, and it's like, who knows what they are? They're just, And
I like the fact that he's like built this hand that he just slaps the thing away with.
Yes.
And you're peeking inside me. Get out! Stop that!
Yeah. And of course, Frank has a wonderful line where he says, "The quickest way to end a miracle is to ask why it is or what it wants."
Yeah.
He's accepted they're just a miracle, and he doesn't want to know what they are. He's just happy that they are.
Yeah.
And yeah, of course. So the two Fix-Its kind of they do repairs around the building, and then they basically have sex effectively, and no one but Faye can realize what's going on. Effectively, like you said, Faye is like intuitive.
Yeah,
she knew from the start they were building a nest, and now she's like, because they all kind of head up to the rooftop and they're like, what's going on? Because they were chasing each other, weren't they? Chasing each other around like crazy, and they're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And Faye's like, can't you tell? Like, to Faye, it's like obvious what they're doing.
Yeah.
And of course they then realize what it is that they're doing and what's going on. And they obviously realize that the female being needs electricity, needs power. So they all sort of band together to build extension cable into extension cable all the way up to the roof. And then it's not long enough, is it? But then Harry comes along with the Christmas lights.
Yeah.
And that's long enough so that they can
they gingerly give it to the sort of male one, and he sort of like not sort of suspiciously takes it and uses it eventually.
Yeah. So the female Fix-It kind of keeps taking electricity, and obviously all the buildings.
And I like the male's cutting little bits of like
Coke cans and
things. Yeah. And my God, the product placement is massive in this, isn't it? It's like, well, they've definitely got Coke and Tide and.
See, the thing is, though, I don't mind that kind of product placement because it makes sense in the scene it's in.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, let's have Superman fighting inside an IHOP or something. It's like there's a reason for this. It makes sense in the scene.
Yeah.
It's not like, I don't know, the Power Rangers movie when Rita Repulsa's like at Dunkin' Donuts or something. You're like, why? It kind of makes sense. It's not like it's obvious that it's product placement, but at the same time, it makes sense in the scene and it kind of works.
Yeah.
So, after I guess a period of time undisclosed, not very long, I'm assuming, the Fix-It, the female Fix-It gives birth to two small flying saucers, and they're all very excited and they're happy. Mason, I think, calls them living hardware, and he's very impressed by it. But a few moments later, obviously the female gives birth to another much smaller, even smaller than the other one's saucer, but it appears to basically die almost immediately, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't. It doesn't look like it's going to live, does it? It just completely just comes out and hits the deck and doesn't move.
Yeah. So Faye basically has a funeral for it and buries it in the flower pot.
Yep.
Mason is, of course, like, hey, we should perform an autopsy, and at this point, Mason and Marissa were kind of starting. There was like hints that maybe they're gonna, maybe get together, even though Marissa has this estranged guitarist or bandmate.
She is the father of her kid is a musician, and he travels a lot, so he's never around. But
she's absolutely outraged by the idea of performing an autopsy on this little baby, as far as she sees it. And she runs away in tears. And obviously, we'll get back to that in a moment. But when they all...
Is that where we find out about the paintings?
No, she... Is it this point? It might be, actually. It's around this point, because at one point she refuses to let him in, and then later on she does.
He goes to go in with her, and she says no, she's not feeling very well, and she shuts the door.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I think you're right.
You see that it was her that collected all the paintings, and she's got them.
She says you made an art collector out of me.
Yeah.
And he's obviously pretty impressed by that. And they talk about, they have that lovely bit with the self-portrait.
Yeah,
which he's obviously made to be really gloomy, and she says, "Oh no, it's all about light. He's standing in the sunlight." And Mason's like, "How do you get that?" And she's like, "I've looked at this painting a lot, and if you look at it, if he takes one step to either side, he'll be in the light. He's staring at the sun."
Yeah.
Which obviously Mason is like, "Wow, this person really has really thought this through."
It's probably more thought than he ever put.
I imagine so. I'm guessing he made it. I'm guessing he made it to be depressing, and he's really pleased that someone's found something really lovely in it. Meanwhile, Harry exhumes the tiny little Fix-It, and he takes some spare parts and heads down to his sort of apartment to try and fix it. To fix the Fix-It.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the diner is doing very well, and the Fix-It's trying to cook the food. The builders, basically all the construction workers, are now eating at the diner, which must be driving Mr. Lacey fucking insane. Like, it's like these fuckers are meant to be, meant to be demolishing the building, not eating in it.
Like he said, there's nothing they can do until they fuck off.
Yeah, he's like, yeah.
And they're not going, so...
Some of them even say, like, "Oh, I'm going to be really sad to knock this place down," This is, like, the food's great. And you get some shenanigans in there with the burger and stuff being
I like
moved.
He says the first burger comes out and it's got two pieces of meat on top of a bun in the middle.
Bun, yeah.
And I like the way she puts it back and she says to Frank, "Hey, look at this." And I like that Frank goes over to a collection of pictures, and he like puts the burger and goes, "Like this."
Yeah. It's their first burger. Carlos goes, basically he heads to see Mr. Lacey and says, "Look, I can do it. I can get the job done." And Lacey's like, "You've had your fucking chance, mate. I've made other plans."
You get that weird shot, don't you? There's a weird shot when Carlos is sat in the office, and the camera lingers on this guy, this like really sort of, well, I would say he's a sort of sleazy looking dude, and you're like, because I think at first he thinks he's the boss, doesn't he? I think.
Yeah.
He talks to him, but it's such a weird sort of shot, and you think, why the hell is it? Is it focusing on him? Yeah. And then, of course, it's revealed that this is Carlos's replacement. He's the guy that's going to get them out of the.
He's going to get the job done.
And I do love the sort of the difference between the sort of it's like two levels of sleaze. Yeah, you've got the bungling sort of like the bungling non-professional sleaze, and then you've got the other who is like cold and calculating and knows exactly what he's doing.
Oh yeah,
they're both sleazes, but they're different breeds. They're apart, sort of thing.
Well, as we will shortly discover, Carlos does have something of a soul. The other one does not. No. But yes, so Mason and Marissa kind of had their conversation. She says that the baby, she doesn't know when it's due because she's never been to the doctor. So Mason kind of takes all the groceries round, doesn't he? Which is when he sees the paintings. He's like, "Hey, I brought you groceries. You don't have to worry about the baby. I've got everything for you." And there's that weird thing when he eats a pepper, and it's like, "Oh, that's obviously a pepper, dude. Like, what were you expecting?" Yeah. Like, I think he thought they were like gherkins or something because he eats it like.
It's a good job you got a load of milk, isn't it?
And their relationship starts to blossom a little. He paints, she poses for him, and Mason paints.
That's great. She says, "Can I have a look?" She goes, "I've got no clothes on," and he's like, "Hey, I pictured you from my mind."
Yeah.
And you got the two little Fix-It in the background. Is it Flotsam and Jetsam? I think she calls them.
Flotsam and Jetsam. You're right. That is what they call them. Yeah.
And they're sort of fighting they're like dueling with paintbrushes, and they're getting it all over them. And she covers them up so that they don't look at the picture. I thought which was funny.
Yeah.
And you always see, when they're at the diner, you get the other thing. It's like one of them's in the soup.
Yeah.
And Faye just sort of pulls back and just chucks him in the dish with the dishes.
Yeah.
Not even gently. She's just sort of like she's carrying around with carrying him around with like dripping soup everywhere, and she just chucks it in the sink.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine.
So yeah. Meanwhile, I guess is some point around here, Harry actually he's trying to fix it and he can't do it, so he kind of gives up and he accidentally hits it into a bowl of water, and then I think a toaster falls in there as well and electrocutes the whole thing. And we see that the third little fix has been brought back to life, but of course Harry keeps it a secret from the rest.
We also see that he's sort of teaching it tricks. He's
teaching it with like a wolf whistle, isn't he? Or, with a dog whistle.
Dog whistle. And he's sort of like to fly into his pocket when he calls, sort of thing.
Yeah. Marissa and Mason's relationship kind of starts to have problems when Hector, the musician boyfriend, the estranged boyfriend, turns up with his bandmates to try and serenade her before heading on to their gig in Chicago. And Mason is like furious. He takes his paintings back from Marissa's apartment and takes them downstairs, where he finds her basically writing him a letter. And this is a really confusing scene because I'm not sure what she was writing in the letter. She couldn't have just said in person. It's a bit weird. But anyway, he confronts her and she says, look, I told him to go away because basically she wants to be with him. And they end up kissing.
Well, I'm guessing that she just thought it would be easier to say everything in a letter than actually saying it to his face.
maybe, but it kind of definitely looked, it just made it more suspicious for him, obviously, walking in a letter. It's like, oh, this is a letter saying you're going to leave.
Wait, dear John, didn't he? So
yeah. So they kiss and that's all great. So where are we now? I think Carlos breaks in and smashes the water pipes.
We get the learning to fly scene.
Oh God, yes, that's such an adorable scene. Yeah, so
the two little fix-its are on the tops of the stairs.
Yeah,
and they're sort of like they're looking down the many floors of the apartment block, and I love that the dad just sort of like knocks the first one straight down, and it sort of
flies. It manages to fly in,
manages to sort of get itself up, and the second one gets booted, and its little arms come out and grabs onto the stair, and the tiny little hands sort of clamped for dear life on the side of this step. And I love this sort of like this sort of little door opens and this buzzsaw blade comes out.
Yeah.
You think, oh my God, it's going to cut its fingers off.
I thought that's what it was doing when I rewatched it. I was like, oh my God.
It's cutting the side of the stair that it's holding, the little overhang of the step.
And of course, this brings everyone out because they can hear sawing going on. They're like, what is going on?
And eventually it cuts completely through the piece of the stair. It falls and it releases a sort of little rotor blade.
It does like a number of things, doesn't it? It like tries a parachute, that doesn't work. It tries,
and the rotor blades it releases don't work properly. No. They flip out like unflip like an umbrella, and he's falling and falling and falling, and then out of nowhere the littlest one saves him. Yeah, comes along and raises him up and completely saves him.
Yeah, and of course it's revealed that Harry managed to bring the little baby fix-it back to life, or at least it's revealed to everyone else. We already knew this. By the way, I love the bit going back a bit when Frank is talking about Harry. I love how often he repeats how good of a boxer Harry used to be. He's like, he's the greatest boxer. He was such a great left hook. But yeah, so Carlos breaks into the basement and he starts smashing up the water and gas pipes, and tries to destroy the circuit breakers. And of course, that brings the adult male fix it down to kind of investigate. Yeah. And the others come down as well. I think Mason, Frank, at least Mason and Frank. Maybe it's just Mason and Frank. They go down to investigate as well. And Carlos is like spooked by the male Fix-It and attacks it with the axe. And that seemingly kills it. It's very damaged, and it falls to the floor, and the lights go off, and it's kind of insinuated that it's probably dead. The female Fix-It is obviously it's amazing how much emotion they can manage to get out of these little things, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's ILM, isn't it?
Of course.
They did a damn good job.
Well, I think actually the effects on the Fix-It still look pretty good to this day. They don't look bad at all.
There is nothing wrong with the some of the sort of the flying around.
The blue screeny stuff looks a little
great, but the actual things themselves are amazing.
I mean, they are practical things, but
yeah. They are top-notch little robots.
In fact, weirdly, this week I actually saw a video of Adam Savage actually had one of the props, which is weird. Cool. Weird timing. I think it came out a couple of weeks ago, but I only saw it this week. I think there's some big movie prop auction going on, so he had like a hands-on with it, and it was the little baby one. It was the tiny one.
Oh, cool.
Or at least one of. I presume they had more than one version of it, but one of them.
Yeah.
Really cute. Which was interesting actually, because he was looking at the prop, and they're actually the babies are actually made up of the junk, aren't they?
Yes.
And I'd never noticed, but it actually had like little bits of writing on it from the various things.
Bits of things on them.
Yeah, it's a lovely attention to detail. Really nice. But of course, Carlos that is basically accused of murder. They're like, "You're a murderous son of a bitch."
Yes.
And Carlos basically tries to escape, but he runs into Harry, who he can't get out the door. So Harry turns up putting his boxing gloves on, and of course you get another of his advert lines. He's like, "I'll pick door number 2" or something like that, isn't he? And punches him through the window out the door. So then we get Faye again confusing Carlos with Bobby.
Yeah.
And she's distraught because she's like, "You're beating up Bobby. Like, why are you beating up Bobby? Like, leave Bobby alone."
This is where we properly get the
Frank
feeling
just
that Frank and his son clearly didn't see eye to eye, and we see they something. Well, I mean, you kind of guess what happened.
They had an argument. Clearly,
they had an argument, and
it's probably the last thing they said to each other.
Yes. And there's a car mentioned, I think, as well.
Yes, I think he died in a car wreck, but it's very clear that the reason he was driving was probably because he had a big argument with Frank and left.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that's what Faye believes. Because Frank finally loses it with her, and he's like, "Bobby is dead." Like, because the whole movie so far, he's been kind of avoiding saying it.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "That's not Bobby. That's not Bobby." But here, he's like, Bobby is dead, and Faye's like, "You always hated him. You're basically the reason he died." And she runs upstairs in tears. And she basically he's her dementia is just getting worse and worse at this point of the movie. So all the baby Fix-Its are terrified, and they basically fly away. They fly out into the night, and the tenants obviously don't know where they are, so they all go out trying to find them. And they're kind of walking around Times Square, just shouting for them. And they're not getting very far, but then they get to a building site, don't they? They get to like a building area.
That's one of the things I forgot to say about the noise that the father makes. It's got this like almost like piston sounding.
Yes. Oh, yes. Sorry, you're right. Yeah. It does. Yeah.
He's got like, and there are guys working in the sewer, aren't they? And they've got like a some sort of cable winder or something that's kind of making the piston noise.
Yeah, and they get quite excited because they
think it's him. They think it's one of them, and they run over it, and of course it's not.
No.
And then I think that's when Harry pulls out the
he steals the bullhorn, doesn't he? Because he's walking around with the whistle anyway. He's walking with the
whistle, and he steals the horn.
Which I love that scene. He steals the horn, and he's like so excited and happy as he runs up to the top of this tower. And they're like, "What the hell is he doing?" But of course, he's blowing into the whistle into the bullhorn, like kind of projecting it across the city. Meanwhile, Faye is with the female Fix-It who's performing surgery and manages to fix the male. And it's one of the things is like, as a kid, I always remember being heartbroken when the male got killed.
Yeah.
But when you rewatch it as an adult, you're like, these Fix-Its literally fix everything. This thing was never going to be dead. He was going to be fine from the start. But it, so she fixes him. And they all kind of all hear the dog whistle, and they all head to Times Square. The babies turn up, and then the two adults turn up.
But they're a little. The adults are a little.
The male in particular is like,
they've after receiving the injury, I think he's a bit pissed off with humans. He doesn't want,
Yeah, well, I think he's particularly. He's obviously very protective of his young now, and he sees that Harry's still holding the baby, isn't he? Harry's holding the little baby, and he keeps kind of flying at them and kind of aggressively, until Harry's like, until Frank is like, you've got to let him go. You've got to let the baby go.
Yeah.
And he lets it go, and basically they all fly off. They all fly off into the night, and they kind of assume that's probably the end of that. That's the last they'll see of them, because obviously their trust has been betrayed, and they're done now. So, meanwhile, Carlos's replacement is basically rigging the building to explode. And Carlos turns up and he's like, "This is my building. I'm going to destroy this building."
Well, he's setting up,
his balloons full of I guess petrol or something. God knows what.
And he's got the. I'm not sure whether it's what the powder is. Is it night?
Well, I think the henchman is trying to do it professionally, isn't he?
Yeah, he's making sure that there's no evidence of foul play. So he's got.
Even though it would be bloody obvious there was foul play. It's like the one building 3 days before it needs to be. Oh, I guess that was a coincidence.
Yeah. And he sets up like a milk carton with some sort of acid.
Yeah.
He puts it into. I guess it's the powder was like was it nitrous or something like that?
I'm not sure.
It's obviously like he's timing it.
It's a ticking time bomb. Yes.
Basically, the acid is going to burn through the milk carton. A certain length of time. Once it hits the powder, it will ignite.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he thinks that there's no one in the building. He thinks they've all left.
Yes, and he tells Carlos that.
He doesn't really care, but
no.
he says, Carlos, there's no one there.
And Carlos basically he basically severs like the gas and stuff, so there's gas flowing into the building now, and he's like, if we're going to do it, let's do it. This is my building. I'm going to do it. And of course...
You're not supposed to leave any evidence, he's like, says to him. He's like,
who cares? This whole place is going to get destroyed anyway. And of course, they set it all. Basically, Carlos speeds it all up, and then they leave the building. And Carlos kind of is leaving with the henchman, and then of course Faye pokes her head out the window, and Carlos is like genuinely horrified. Mm-hmm. He says to Lacey's henchman, he's like, "You told me this building was empty," and he like basically attacks the guy. And this fucking guy, I mean, I gotta give him credit. He's quite smart, but like smart. Yeah. He's an absolute piece of shit, but smart. He's like, "Oh, you broke my knee. You broke my knee. I can't walk." And he's like, "I can't move. So then Carlos goes in to get Faye, and then the guy just stands up and runs away. He's like, he was fine. He's just doing it to kind of.
Yeah, get rid of him.
To get rid of him, which is smart. Asshole, but smart. So of course Carlos goes up to see Faye, and Faye doesn't want to speak to him. Faye wants nothing to do with him. He pretends like he's trying his best, but she's now obviously realised the truth, hasn't she? And she's not. Well,
first of all, she says she's cooking a meal, isn't she?
He gets a bit forceful to try and get her out, doesn't he?
And he basically mentions the car. You got to come down to the car, and that's when she realizes, that he's not Bobby, and
she refuses to leave.
Yeah. And the guy told him where he put the
carton.
The carton with the thing, and of course you think if he was sensible, he'd have gone and got rid of that first before he went to get.
Yeah, that would have probably been the more.
He goes back to try and stop it, but of course by the time he gets there, it's too late, and it's the interaction has started, and it goes off.
Yeah.
And the fire starts spreading very quickly.
And Carlos kind of, I guess at first he tries to flee, but then he comes back through the fire escape, doesn't he, to try and get Faye. And he burns his hands in the process. But he does get Faye out just as everyone kind of returns to see the building on fire. They've just come back from losing the Fix-Its. And of course, Frank is distraught. He sees Faye being carted out in a stretcher. I think we then cut to the next day, which is a lovely scene. I love this scene where you've got the builders there ready to demolish the place, but Harry sat on the front doorstep with his dog, and the Mr. Lacey turns up and he's like, "The fuck are you doing? I'm paying you to knock this building down." And they're like, "Well, we're not gonna knock it down because he's there." And Mr. Lacey's like, "I don't see anything. I don't see any problem. Just demolish it." And the Gus says, "No. When he moves, we'll move.
Yeah.
We're not moving until he does." Which I don't know why. I just think it's a really lovely scene. It's a really well made kind of scene, and it's
I mean, it's really sad.
It's sad, but it's really nice to like. It would have been so easy for this movie to make all the builders out to be awful assholes. People, and they're not at all. They're actually really, they're just doing a job, but they're not heartless. They're just doing their job, but not at the expense of someone's life, which obviously Mr. Lacey would be happy to do. So they refuse, and then later that night, not only do the Fix-Its return, but they bring all their mates. There's like hundreds of the things. And of course they rebuild the whole building
immaculately.
Oh yeah, not just back to the state it was at the start of the movie, but back to how it presumably was when it was built. I mean, it's a beautiful looking building, which kind of goes back to what Carlos said at the start of the movie. Mason is trying to
bring
historic value, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was trying to bring the lady to show in the building so that they can preserve it for.
And she's like, this is not in any fit state, and I'm guessing that the ending we get is because the lady comes back and is like, oh, actually now it is of historic value. But we then cut to the hospital, and Faye's kind of recovering, and Carlos comes in with his hands burnt, and he's like, I've brought some flowers, I just wanted to see you, and of course Frank tries to say, hey, look, it's Bobby's back, and she knows now. She's like, no, she's I guess she's still probably got dementia, but at least that portion of it is kind of cleared. She's like, no, he's dead, and she just starts crying.
He's dead.
She just starts crying. She's finally accepted the death of her son. And Mason and what's her name? I forgot her bloody name now. Marissa, thank you. Yes, Mason and Marissa are like sleeping on each other outside, in the hallway, and the police turn up. I'm not sure why the police would turn up to do this, but it's very nice of them anyway.
It's like, okay.
It's very good of them. But the police turn up, and they obviously tell them, you should probably go back home.
Yeah, there's something you should see.
Yeah, because sorry, I should say as well that she says she wants to go home. Faye says she wants to go home, and Frank says we are going to our home. But she's like, I want to go to our home. And of course they head back and are delighted to see that the building is there. And Mr. Lacey's getting kind of some awkward interviews with with the newspapers or whatever, the film crew, saying like, what are you going to do? And he's like, well,
he's like, we heard this building had burned down the day before. He's like, well, clearly not. Clearly that was was misinformation.
Yeah, because everyone's like, this is mental, like, what has happened here? This is like the weirdest thing. But they ask him what his plans are, and he's like, my plans haven't changed.
I don't know whether you noticed, but I noticed that the first time. Did you see in the crowd, an incredibly young Louis Guzman is...
Oh, I didn't notice that, no.
Yeah, he's just part of the crowd. It's like, wow, that's Louis Guzman. I've never noticed that. Yeah, I looked it up afterwards. It was
probably
him.
like his first role.
It probably was, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I hadn't noticed that. But yeah, so of course, the building is back, and we get that wonderful shot of we see the tiling, the mosaic And
exactly.
It's all like pristine and perfect, and it's all as they remember it, and it's all lovely. And of course, presumably because the building is of historic value, we see that Mr. Lacey.
Also, their permits ran out for demolishing it too.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess they could just get another permit. That it would have just cost a bit more
yeah.
money. But I guess once it's of historic value, that's the end of that. And we see that Mr. Lacey does build his towers, but right in the middle of it is this very ill-fitting old building that's
yeah,
it's sat there as the credits roll, and it's a lovely ending.
It is a great ending.
Yeah, so that was Batteries Not Included, and I gotta say I had so much fun rewatching this. It's an absolute joy of a movie.
And like you said, I think it stands up beautifully.
It really does, and the story is strong.
Movie. Yeah, everybody in it's really good.
Yeah.
And I think most of the people other than the two mains were all like pretty much newcomers at the time, I think.
Yeah.
So it's and originally it was going to be one of the amazing stories.
Oh really? I don't think you would have had enough time to do that justice.
Yeah, well that's it. It was going to be one of those, and Spielberg liked the script so much he said, "No, I think this should be a movie in itself."
Yeah. So he decided to produce it.
He put forward that it would be a movie, and they basically,
because it's who is Matthew Robbins? Matthew Robbins directed.
Yeah. And interesting. I didn't know much about Matthew Robbins, but he went on to write Dragon Slayer and Crimson Peak.
Oh, he did. Yeah, Mimic.
Yeah. It's so very interesting. I mean, going earlier on, you were saying about movies that you watched as a kid that you haven't got much. Dragon Slayer, I don't think I've seen that since I was a kid. We
should add that to the list for some time. Because, yeah.
I mean, I don't even know whether it holds up or anything.
I'd be interested to find out, though.
Yeah.
I'd be up for giving that
a go. I think we should probably definitely add that to...
just out of curiosity, if nothing else.
Yeah, if nothing else.
But yeah, I genuinely think this movie holds up. I think it's a wonderful film. I'm so glad we reviewed it, because quite often on this show we do films and it's like, I've seen that film a million times, that's fine. It was nice to be like, oh my god, I actually haven't watched this movie since I was like a kid, and it was an absolute joy to revisit. And I can see, it absolutely holds up to my memories.
I like the whole thing of. Did you know that there was a horror movie that came out roughly the same time that had to change its name?
No.
So there was a movie called Battery. It was going to be called Batteries Not Included.
Right.
And this was coming out, so they had to change their name, and they changed the name to Child's Play.
Oh, okay.
Which makes sense, actually. Child's Play would have... Batteries Not Included actually makes a lot more sense as a title for that movie than Child's Play does.
It does, actually. Yeah, it works really well. Yeah.
Which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sweet. It's, brilliantly acted. It's the effects for the most, on the actual creatures themselves.
They look great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lovely family movie.
Is.
It's the sort of stuff that, doesn't quite get so much attention anymore, but...
No, it's strange, actually. It is a movie that no one talks about, and I wonder if that's one of the reasons I just hadn't got round to revisiting it. But I'm so glad I did, because it was a big part of my childhood, this film. It's one of the rare movies that just fell off my radar. Because even like this movie and this movie and Flight of the Navigator, two movies I didn't watch very much since I was a kid, but I did recently rewatch Flight of the Navigator. So, this was kind of going to be next on my list anyway, so it was good to,
Yeah, Flight of the Navigator still mostly holds up as well.
Oh, it looks great. Yeah, it looks great.
When they still keep threatening to
remake it.
Make it, don't they? And I think it's another one that really should, leave it. Although I had heard that it was going to be the last version. I think was going to be a
reboot sequel thing. Yeah,
which is okay, fine, I guess. But
it would be nice if they give work to the kid, because that guy had a very troubled life after Flight of the Navigator. I always get that movie confused with Flight of the Intruder, which is a very different film.
Bloody hell. No, there's a movie I don't think I've thought about.
No, it's only because it's only because whenever I talk about Flight of the Navigator, I have to physically, I have to force myself to say Navigator, not Intruder, because I always say the two the wrong way around.
Yeah, those are very different movies.
They're very different movies, yeah. But
the other one that also I think I would put in with those two in a similar type was Daryl. Did you ever see Daryl?
No, I don't think I've seen Daryl. What's Daryl?
It's
here it is. I've got it here. That's weird. It's on IMDb right now.
Yeah, it's a sort of it's like a robot.
Oh, okay.
And it came out. I think it must be roughly the same. 85. It came out, and yeah, it's about like a young kid that's actually a robot. It's one that I loved as a kid, and now I only have a very vague memory of it. But it was it lives in that part of my mind where Flight of the Navigator and Batteries Are Not Included exist. It's that part. So maybe I'll give that a go at some point as well to see whether that holds up.
Yeah.
I only remember bits and pieces. I remember that the kid flies a plane at one point. I think it might be is it a blackbird he flies?
Okay.
But I know he flies a plane at some point, and there's obviously it's your typical sort of like 80s robot.
Yeah, short circuit. Yeah,
it's got that sort of stuff. Yeah, he flies a blackbird.
Oh, as you do when you're a kid.
Yeah, I do not remember why, but
I'm guessing the robot helps. But yeah, cool. Well, that was Batteries Not Included. I cannot recommend watching this movie again enough, to be honest. It was fantastic. I had a great time.
If you've never seen it, give it a go.
For sure.
It's a beautiful family movie.
It really is, and it made me a bit sad because I was like, oh yeah, I remember when Disney did family movies well. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember when they used to do good stuff.
There was a sort of period where, like, sort of 70s and 80s, where Disney were doing interesting things like the black hole and stuff like that.
I still, as flawed as that movie is, it's very flawed, but I love the black hole. I think it's one of the darkest Disney family movies. It's great, and Ernest Borgnine, I've always got a soft spot for, so anytime I see Ernest Borgnine in anything, I'm happy. But yeah, I love that film, and I love all the robot designs and everything. It's great.
Yeah, the work was great in that.
Yeah. But yeah, that was Batteries Not Included. Next week, well, I say next week, it's going to be a couple of days for us, but next week, because we're kind of behind. But next week we will be looking at. Well, there might actually be two. It depends what we do next week. But we'll discuss that. But at least next week we will be talking about movies that we've watched recently, and then in theory we'll do our Christmas special. But I guess it depends if we're going to have time. I guess we'll have a discussion about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening, everybody. And like I said, we'll be back with our normal review fare next time. But until then, stay safe, and we'll catch you next time.